I'd like to call this hearing to order. Good morning. The committee meets today to receive an update on the readiness and posture of U.S. Special Operations Command and U.S. Cyber Command. Our witnesses are Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low-Intensity Conflict, Christopher Maier, Commander of U.S. Special Operations Command, General Bryan Fenton, and Commander of U.S. Cyber Command and Director of the National Security Agency, General Paul Nakasone. On behalf of the committee, I would ask our witnesses to convey our appreciation to the men and women you represent and their families for their service and professionalism. We live in a complex and dangerous global security environment. From Russia's aggression in Europe to China's malign influence in the Indo-Pacific to persistent threats from Iran, North Korea, and violent extremist groups, prevailing in this environment will require the tailored and often clandestine capabilities that only our special operations and cyber forces can provide. The United States has been reducing its footprint in conflict zones around the world. As such, the special operations community is at an inflection point, but is no less relevant to the future challenges we face. As the Defense Department's recently released Joint Concept for Competing makes clear, the object of our nation's adversaries is to win without fighting. The concept warns that if we do not adapt to the realities of long-term competition, the United States risks ceding strategic influence, advantage, and leverage while preparing for a war that never occurs. The skills, knowledge, and perhaps most importantly, the relationships with foreign partners that our Special Operations Forces have developed over the past 20 years of combat make them well positioned to contribute significantly to this strategic competition. Assistant Secretary Maier and General Fenton, I look forward to an update regarding your efforts to focus and prepare our Special Operations Forces for the challenges ahead. In particular, I would ask that you discuss the capabilities we need to build an enduring advantage over our competitors and what lessons can be drawn from the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. As part of this, I would like to know how you are shaping the force of the future through new recruiting and retention efforts, including building a culture of accountability. A number of high-profile misconduct cases have reflected poorly on the Special Operations community, and additional efforts to build upon Socom's 2020 Comprehensive Review of Culture and Ethics seems necessary. I also want to hear how you are addressing the unique challenges faced by Special Operations families. The Office of the ASD SOLIC plays a critical role in the oversight of and advocacy for our Special Operations Forces as the Service Secretary-like civilian for Socom. I believe more must be done to assure ASD SOLIC is provided the necessary authority and resources, including manpower, to fulfill these responsibilities. I look forward to hearing more about the Department's efforts on this front. Turning to Cyber Command, I would like to commend our cyber forces and the intelligence community for their performance over the past year in exposing Russia's activities and helping Ukraine defend itself against both kinetic and cyber attacks. Intelligence officials are understandably cautious about revealing hardware insights on adversaries, but this current strategy has proven highly effective in strengthening the international community's response and creating dilemmas for Vladimir Putin. This is a great example of competing effectively in the information domain, and I hope we will continue to make this kind of creative use of intelligence. Some of the tools in our toolbox, like the Section 702 authority from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA, are critical to our ability to counter our adversaries' malign activities. The committee would appreciate your views on the importance of Section 702 of FISA, which sunsets at the end of this year, and why you believe it is essential that we renew that authority. We would like also to know what guardrails are in place to give the public confidence that the authority is being used judiciously. General Nakasone, you have been working to mature the cyber force and advance its capabilities to conduct offensive, offensive, and supporting intelligence operations. It is widely recognized that our cyber mission forces are struggling with shortfalls in personnel numbers. We know that addressing this issue is your highest priority. The military services must also ensure that personnel management provides qualified and trained personnel to your command at the beginning of their tours, so both the personnel and the command can take full advantage of the time of their assignment to your force. I would also note that the private sector has realized the immense value of our cyber operators and offering them very high compensation to leave the military. The services must adjust accordingly by providing a creative combination of incentives to compete for and retain these personnel. Finally, over the last decade, a recurring debate has been waged over whether to sustain the dual hat arrangement, whereby the commander of Cyber Command also serves as the director of the NSA. Recently, an independent panel established by the Director of National Intelligence and the Secretary of Defense, and led by former Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joe Dunford, concluded that the dual hat arrangement should be sustained. We would welcome your thoughts on this issue. Thank you again to all witnesses for your service and appearance before us today. I look forward to your testimony. Now let me recognize the ranking member, Senator Wicker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that very fine and thorough statement. I very much appreciate that, and I want to thank our witnesses for being with us once again. The United States faces the most complex and daunting set of security challenges since the height of the Cold War. And our witnesses today are on the front lines of those challenges. From the Chinese Communist Party's unprecedented military buildup, growing hegemonic ambitions, to Russia's brazen and unprovoked attack on Ukraine, our adversaries are testing American resolve. Our foremost adversary and competitor, the Chinese Communist Party, has stressed both Socom and Cybercom in ways we never imagined a decade ago. Last year, General Nakasone said Chinese advances in cyber operations are unlike anything he has seen before. He also noted the People's Republic of China is a more difficult adversary than the Soviet Union because they are much more tolerant of risk. So this presents new challenges to our deterrence posture. Although Beijing may be our foremost adversary, others are not far behind. The cyber capabilities of Russia, Iran, and North Korea have continued to surprise many. I would appreciate an update on DoD's work to implement a zero-trust architecture and provide defensive cyber tools across the department and the industrial base. I also look forward to discussing how collaborative cyber activities with our allies and partners, such as Hunt Forward operations, have helped to identify vulnerabilities, mitigate threats, and strengthen our network defenses. Military success in cyberspace depends on the readiness of our cyber mission forces. I hope to hear about how we can improve our cyber force readiness and accelerate development of cyber capabilities, particularly on the offensive side. General Fenton is no stranger to the determination of the People's Liberation Army. Having served as commander of our Special Operations Forces in the Pacific and the deputy commander of INDOPACOM, his challenge is twofold: to build a force capable of enhancing our deterrence and warfighting in the Western Pacific, even as the threat environment facing our nation demands that Socom should remain fully engaged in the fight against violent Islamic terrorist groups across the world, from Africa to South Asia. His command's work is critical to our country's security and is often the first to respond to our nation's most pressing, unforeseen emergencies. In the 2022 National Defense Strategy, General Fenton's forces have been asked to assume significant risk. I think this committee will want to ensure his command is fully resourced to mitigate that risk to the degree possible. And I would also ask General Fenton and Mr. Maier whether their authorities and resources in the upcoming year are sufficient for mission tasks. What is clear to me is that the role and importance of Special Operations Forces is only increasing as the nature and complexity of threats facing our nation increase. The resources we provide to Special Operations Command should reflect that reality. Our first job in this committee is to provide the tools our military needs to deter and, if not successful there, to defeat these threats. There's no doubt that continued real growth in the defense budget top line above inflation remains essential to our national security. This requires action now, not later. Our adversaries are not waiting, neither should we. This committee led the bipartisan charge to increase the defense budget in last year's cycle. Mr. Chairman, I frankly have little confidence that the administration budget request this year will be sufficient. If it is not, this committee will again need to step up to ensure that our military has the resources it needs to defend the nation. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to our witnesses. Look forward to hearing from them.
Thank you very much, Senator Wicker. We will begin with Secretary Maier, please.
So, Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Wicker, and distinguished members of this committee, thank you for providing the opportunity to testify on the global posture of our nation's Special Operations Forces, or SOF. I'm honored to appear alongside General Fenton and General Nakasone. I could not ask for better teammates in General Fenton and Command Sergeant Major Shane Shorter in ensuring your SOF enterprise is prepared to address the threats facing the United States today and in meeting the challenges to come. I start with thanking Congress and especially this committee for your enduring support of the men and women of SOF. I am particularly grateful for your assistance in building the organization I lead, Special Operations and Low Intensity Conflict, or SOLIC, with dedicated and gifted public servants. Sitting before this committee last year, I testified we were at an inflection point in SOF's transformation to focus more on the pacing challenge of China and the acute threat posed by Russia, while maintaining enduring capabilities to counter violent extremist organizations, address Iran's destabilizing behavior, and conduct no-fail crisis response around the globe. Today, in updating you on this progress and the work that remains, I will highlight 3 areas: SOF's ongoing transition in support of the National Defense Strategy, the development of SOLIC, and our continued emphasis on empowering and supporting our people. First, we are transforming the SOF enterprise to achieve the goals of the NDS. While SOF's role in counterterrorism is widely understood and appreciated, my team and I work daily to ensure the value proposition of SOF in integrated deterrence and campaigning against strategic competitors is accounted for and incorporated into the department's processes. As it has been in every major military challenge this nation has confronted since World War II, your SOF will play an essential role. To start, the deep relationship SOF has forged with allies and partners over the last 2 decades, often through shared challenges and sacrifice, has produced an international SOF enterprise that provides us unique, firsthand understanding of the global operating environment. It also has enhanced the resilience of our allies and partners to resist aggression. Second, drawing on those relationships and our ability to reach some of the most difficult locations on the globe, your SOF formations provide unique access and placement that creates options for our nation's leaders. And SOF is adept at creating dilemmas for our adversaries. Here I would highlight the many years of our investment in transforming the Ukrainian forces into highly capable force that is consistently outperforming Russia on the battlefield today. Representing the value that SOF brings to the joint force is one of my primary responsibilities, and we continue to make progress institutionalizing SOLIC's role as Congress has directed. Through my role providing civilian leadership for the organized, train, and equip of SOF, we have established over the last year in the department a series of recurring processes and delivered key outcomes for the SOF enterprise. For example, the Special Operations Policy Oversight Council, which I chair, provides a senior-level forum to address SOF unique challenges across the department. We also have made progress on important initiatives to deter our adversaries and fill warfighting gaps, especially on irregular warfare and information operations. I am also proud that SOLIC played a central role in the department's landmark Civilian Harm and Mitigation Response Action Plan. Finally, I would emphasize the first SOF truth remains truer today than ever. Humans are more important than hardware. None of our efforts are possible without our most important resource, our people. With the strong support of Congress, we continue to evolve the Preservation of the Force and Families, or POTF program, to address SOF unique challenges and to optimize physical, psychological, social, spiritual, and now cognitive performance. We also continue to prioritize a diverse, capable force by removing barriers to participation and advancement in SOF, an operational imperative if we are to succeed in an ever more complex geopolitical environment. Recent publicized challenges remind us that we must continue to evaluate our approach to force employment, accountability, and most importantly, present and engaged leadership. A healthy SOF culture that reflects our nation's values is essential to readiness, and core to ensuring we remain the most lethal SOF enterprise the world has ever known. Investing in our people is the cornerstone of ensuring your SOF are ready to take on our nation's toughest challenges, because it is not a question of if, but when the call will come. So, Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of this committee, I thank you again for your partnership and support and for this opportunity to testify today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. General Fenton, please.
Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Wicker, and
Could you bring that closer, General, the microphone as close as possible?
I'll come up closer. Thank you. How's this, Chairman? Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Wicker, and distinguished members of this committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm honored to testify alongside the Honorable Chris Maier and General Paul Nakasone. And I'm equally honored to be here on behalf of the dedicated men and women of U.S. Special Operations Command. Joining me today is Command Sergeant Major Shane Shorter, U.S. Socom's senior enlisted leader. Command Sergeant Major Shorter is representative of the incredible U.S. Socom team, particularly our non-commissioned officer corps. Our non-commissioned officers are the backbone of our military and a decisive advantage within your special operations community. And they make us the envy of every military around the world. We are thankful for the leadership and support of this Congress, particularly this committee, a committee with the legacies of Senators Nunn and Cohen, who had the vision and determination to establish U.S. Socom almost 36 years ago. Thank you for your decades of steadfast support ever since. Your Special Operations Forces remain a national advantage as we enter a decisive era, an era where the strategic competitors such as People's Republic of China and Russia seek to reshape the rules-based international order. And in response, your Special Operations Forces strengthen and sustain deterrence globally as part of the Department of Defense's approach to integrated deterrence. With SOF's World War II origins and DNA rooted in decades of experience in strategic competition, now drawing upon our 20-plus years of hard-won combat credibility and coalition experience, your SOF provide creative, tailorable, and asymmetric options for our nation, while creating dilemmas for our competitors. And as part of the broader joint force, we campaign every day to deter and prevent aggression, counter coercion, close warfighting gaps, and tackle shared challenges alongside allies and partners, all in support of accelerating the Department of Defense's strategic momentum towards our NDS objectives. Yet your SOF also remain vigilant in protecting our homeland and U.S. interests from the persistent threats posed by global terrorist networks. In doing so, your SOF worked tirelessly alongside a trusted network of allies and partners, U.S. interagency counterparts, and our joint force teammates to disrupt VEOs wherever they may be. And while we campaign for integrated deterrence and counter violent extremists, your SOF's capability to respond to crisis represent a critical strategic hedge and advantage for our nation. Agile, tailored, modernized, and capable, they enable us to undertake sensitive, high-risk missions, crucial to safeguarding and rescuing our citizens and protecting vital national interests. Foundational to all these efforts remains our long-standing collaborative partnership with ASD SOLIC Chris Maier and his team. The oversight, policy guidance, and advocacy within the department provided by ASD SOLIC are essential for the modernization, readiness, and well-being of our SOF units and their families. And together, we are committed to placing people as our #1 priority. And we are preparing for the future by investing in them and by leveraging our nation's diverse talent to solve diverse challenges. And to those listening today who are considering service to our nation, know the profound sense of calling and purpose that those of us in serving in uniform share. We know that a deeply rewarding journey lies ahead for those who choose to join. You will be part of an incredible team of men and women tackling the toughest challenges for our nations. Just yesterday, I had the privilege of hearing from Colonel Retired Paris Davis, our nation's most recent Medal of Honor recipient and a Green Beret. At yesterday's ceremony to induct him into the Pentagon's Hall of Heroes, he summed up his military service and time with the Green Beret in 3 words: purpose, opportunity, and pride. And as we speak here today, more than 5,000 service members of U.S. Socom are deployed, and they share his sense of purpose and pride. And they are defending our nation and standing shoulder to shoulder with allies and partners in over 80 countries to make our world a safer place. The courage and commitment of our special operations community, our military, inspires the CSM and me daily, and we are immensely proud to serve with them. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, General Fenton. General Nakasone, please.
Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Wicker, and distinguished members of the committee, I'm honored to testify beside Assistant Secretary Christopher Maier and General Bryan Fenton. Joining me today is Command Sergeant Major Cheryl Lyon, the U.S. Cyber Command and National Security Agency Senior Enlisted Leader. We're honored to represent the military and civilian members of U.S. Cyber Command. In the contested cyberspace domain, U.S. Cyber Command acts against foreign adversaries that threaten our nation through malicious cyber activity and enables action by our federal, private, and allied partners. For instance, a combined U.S. Cyber Command NSA election security group countered malicious cyber actors and oversaw measures to enable the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, among other domestic partners, to defend the recent midterm elections. The 2022 election cycle proceeded from primaries to certifications without significant impacts, due in part to our effort. Going forward, success for U.S. Cyber Command will be measured by how effectively foreign adversarial actors are prevented from achieving their strategic objectives. Last year saw significant maturation for U.S. Cyber Command, but our work is not done. In 2023, we must continue to focus on our people, our partners, and our ability to deliver a decisive advantage. We must improve readiness, bolster our resilience, and maintain a culture of continuous improvement. We will continue to deliver warfighting advantage for the joint force and partners throughout competition, crisis, and conflict. We are doing so by executing our service-like authorities to build and sustain campaigns in and through cyberspace and the information environment. Through these efforts, we seek to counter adversaries in competition, to deter conflict, and prevail against aggression. Aligning efforts of both U.S. Cyber Command and NSA is essential to achieving these goals and is in the best interest of the nation and national security. It all starts with people. The men and women of U.S. Cyber Command working with NSA and partners here and abroad, we win with people. The men and women of United States Cyber Command are grateful for the support of this committee and Congress that has been given to our command. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, General Nakasone. Gentlemen, thank you for your testimony. And as I indicated in my opening statement, Mr. Secretary, we've made progress in strengthening the ASD SOLIC to act as a service secretary-like position regarding Socom. But there's more to do, particularly with respect to personnel, facilities, and other aspects of your office. Could you comment on what more must be done?
Thank you, Chairman. And again, I would thank this committee in particular for the ongoing and very consistent support for the ASD SOLIC position and indeed my staff. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd give you a quick snapshot to say that I think we have established a degree of momentum and a bit of irreversibility, which certainly wasn't the sense of things when I first took this role. And a lot of that has to do with the continued support of Secretary Austin, Deputy Secretary Hicks. I think as I've testified in this committee before, the best snapshot I can give the committee is when the Secretary of Defense convenes his service secretaries, it convenes the Secretary of the Army, Secretary of the Air Force, and Secretary of the Navy, and me as ASD SOLIC to ensure that soft voice and perspective is in the room. To your question, Mr. Chairman, on areas of growth, I think we do need to continue to add staff. We've added about 20 or 25 people over the last 2 years with support from this committee, and that's against about 50 people currently. So it's a very small staff compared to the services, even with our limited authorities relative to them. And then I think most importantly, leadership billets. We need more ability for people in a very hierarchical Defense Department to be able to participate in meetings at the right level of seniority, sir. So I'd highlight those.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. General Fenton, what's the value to Socom in having a properly empowered service secretary like civilian like Secretary Maier?
Senator, thank you very much for that question. And I'd say on a couple fronts, very big value. First and foremost, as Secretary Maier just mentioned, his ability to be at the service, excuse me, secretary tables with a SecDef and represent issues for the Socom team along the lines of people, education, training, and even, as he mentioned, where SOF will be and play a big role in terms of integrated competition. Excuse me. That's extremely important for the Socom enterprise. I'd say next, his ability to be with the service secretaries and represent issues from Socom back to the services that we take our folks in from is very important for us. We're very grateful for that. And certainly his direction in many ways throughout the department in terms of how Socom views not only integrated deterrence but crisis response and counterterrorism has been welcome guidance for me. So I'm very grateful to have a service secretary. And as I told you, I think, Chairman, when I was at confirmation, I look forward to testifying next to my service secretary.
Thank you very much, General. General Nakasone, the issue of readiness with cyber mission forces has been a persistent issue we've discussed at the committee numerous times. The cyber mission forces play a very key role, and they have very demanding tasks. They require personnel with special aptitude, training, and experience. And one of the ironies, of course, is when you develop such a person, he or she becomes very attractive for outside employers. So you have a retention problem as well as other problems. And in some cases in the past, it's been indicated that the services are not providing you the skilled and trained individuals you need, which does not provide you with the maximum possible use. So could you comment on the present sort of situation with respect to cyber mission forces and also any steps that we should be taking to improve their readiness?
Chairman, as we take a look at the readiness of our 133 teams, it really comes down to 3 R's. It's the readiness piece of it, it's the recruiting piece of it, it's the training piece of it, and it's the retention piece of it. And so when you look at that, where I see this right now is the fact that the services have done a good job of recruiting the forces that I need. Assigning the numbers are one of the things that we're working with right now to make sure that we have all of the folks that we need. We've worked very hard to get the training to a very simple and predictable level. That continues to improve. The other piece that we need to work hand in hand with the services is the retention piece, which you highlighted. The challenge of someone that has this type of training is very attractive to the outside. But several of the services, the Marines included, have made tremendous progress in this and being able to focus their Marines on doing what these Marines wanted to do, which is cyber operations. And being able to stay within our force for long periods of time, we see a reflective retention rate that's much higher.
Well, thank you very much. Gentlemen, again, thank you for your testimony. Let me recognize Senator Wicker.
Thank you. First question to General Fenton, and this is about the Naval Small Craft Instruction and Technical Training School, NAVCIATS, which provides training to foreign forces on small boat operations and unmanned aerial systems. The annual operating cost is $14.8 million, and that is divided across multiple stakeholders, including the Navy, Socom, and our foreign partners. So, General Fenton, let me ask you, do you agree with General Richardson, the commander of Southcom, who said the school generates outside return on investments? Ukrainian troops were being trained there last year when President Putin launched his unprovoked and illegal attacks on their country. Do you agree sir, that NAVSEOTS provides value to our combatant commanders and key foreign military partners?
Senator, thank you for that question. I am absolutely familiar with this NAVSEOTS as you refer to. I was more familiar with it when I was in Indo-PACOM as a deputy commander, and there I saw value in that type of training. And I will say in many types of training, certainly, and we thank this committee for a number of efforts that Socom has at its disposal in terms of 333, the 1202, and 127 Echo, that increase the capability of our forces and create partnerships in the way that we need those partnerships, and in Socom we call those partnerships pacing items.
And $14.8 million is a relatively modest investment. Would you agree?
Senator, I'm not familiar with the budget. I am familiar, again, with the type of training that NAVSEOTS produces.
Okay, well, so we've established that there is value there, so I appreciate that. Let me turn then to General Nakasone. Tell us about cyber in support of our Ukrainian allies and the Russian use of cyber in support of their illegal and aggressive invasion of Ukraine.
Senator, the story begins on the 3rd of December, 2021, when we deployed a hunt-forward team to Kyiv. That began a 70-day journey for us to ensure that Ukraine was at a much higher state of cyber readiness. As you know, we saw early attacks on specific Ukrainian sites within their government, and we also saw continued attacks as the invasion approached. What we were able to do during that time was work with a series of partners to bring the tools and technology to Ukraine that was able to assist them as Russia conducted continued attacks. We continue today with support to a number of different combatant commands, U.S. European Command on the training mission for Ukraine, also to U.S. Strategic Command as we take a look at ensuring that our NC3 network, our Nuclear Command and Control and Communications Network, is the top and most important network and is fully secure. As we move forward, we continue full-spectrum operations with a series of partners to include Ukraine to provide them assistance as they battle the Russians.
Okay. Do you expect Russia is able to intensify new capabilities in a spring offensive this year?
From the cyber perspective, we're watching this very carefully, Senator. They are a very capable adversary. We continue to work very tightly with our other partners within the U.S. government, CISA, FBI, to ensure that our U.S. critical infrastructure is protected, and NATO in general to ensure that they're aware of the tradecraft that the Russians might use. Okay,
Secretary Maier, what more do you need? You were asked and you said you need to add staff, and then you need more attention to the leadership billets. Do you have what you need in terms of funding right now to do this and to deal with your enormous challenges? If we give you the same amount you got this fiscal year with an inflation adjustment, will that be enough?
So, Ranking Member, speaking just to my specific office, I think we are probably on a good pathway just in terms of funding. I already highlighted some of the other requirements. In terms of the entire special operations enterprise, I think our priorities are represented, understanding full well that the challenge with inflation means that if our budget is flat, that reduces our buying power. So that's something we'll need to keep a close eye on, sir.
And yet you need additional staff, and you need increased leadership billets.
Yes, sir. So I think we're on a good trajectory with the leadership billets. We're part of that conversation in the department. I think, especially in out years, we're going to need to add more staff to build that capability to really help this transition I've described from counterterrorism crisis response to also include the peer competition that we've talked about, and I expect we'll talk about more, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Wicker. Senator Shaheen, please.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here this morning, for your testimony, and for your service to the country. I think I would start this question with you, Secretary Maier, because Socom and Cybercom really are at the nexus of DOD's efforts to address the weaponization of information, which I think has become as much an issue for us as we're looking at our ability to be successful around the world as our military capability. So can you, Secretary Maier, talk about DOD's role in addressing that misinformation and how DOD coordinates with other agencies and departments within government to address disinformation?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Senator Shaheen. So I would broadly start with describing DoD information as rooted in military objectives. So as we talk about how this fits into the interagency, we have a distinct role and a value to play, but not for broad messaging, not for all the work that, say, the State Department or some other entities would do. And I think we have looked at significant components of the information operations enterprise and really tried to tighten and target it more so the value proposition and the measures of effectiveness are there. This is really a journey we're on, and I think it's one that the leadership of the department is very, very focused on. So I would leave you with the idea that this is much more of a priority in the context of integrated deterrence that the National Defense Strategy calls out, because information is so critical, as you said, to all the aspects of success, especially as we start to think about adversaries we're trying to deter, ma'am.
So as you think about our efforts to recognizing, you're saying that we're trying to be more focused in how we address information at DOD, but clearly what happens at state and in other government agencies affects what DOD does. So are there policy changes? Are there resources? Is there coordination that should be done that we should be thinking about? And I would ask General Fenton and Nakasone to respond to that as well.
Briefly, ma'am, I think we need to invest more in the DoD information operations enterprise. It's not been one that has frequently been a focus, frankly, and I think with more capability in the department, it'll enhance our ability to coordinate in an interagency standpoint. That's still very much a work in progress, ma'am.
General Fenton.
Senator, I would echo all of Secretary Maier's comments, and then I would add that the integrated deterrence approach, I think, does demand a whole-of-government approach in the information operations. And Socom is one part of that in the department side, but we also coordinate with other agencies of the government to ensure that we're integrated, and that folks know that the Socom piece is a traditional military activity. The information operations space, as I like to say, is a place we absolutely have to be as part of a military traditional military activity, and to get effects for commanders, either to message an adversary, to see misinformation, and provide that to a host nation. So, Senator, I think our key message to the Socom enterprise as we move forward is we remain aligned with the department, and certainly as part of the whole government approach, it's a key part for us. And our state colleagues and other colleagues in the U.S. government are very important as we do that.
General Nakasone.
Senator, begins overseas. We're very familiar on how to do these operations. We've seen it in the elections. We've seen it with Russia, Ukraine. We've seen it with Iran. The same actors that are interfering in our elections are the same actors that are doing influence operations. We go after them. This is what persistent engagement is for U.S. Cyber Command and the National Security Agency. We find them, and we continue to ensure that we understand exactly what they're doing. We examine their tradecraft, and then we share it with a series of different partners. This is only done effectively, as both the Secretary and General Fenton have indicated, is with partners. So inside the United States, sharing signatures with the FBI, who share it with social media companies, being able to work with allied partners who have a broader understanding. But then I think it's also with, how do you bring the totality of our government against them, whether it's State Department, Treasury, FBI, being able to go after them. The one thing we've learned, though, in this is that they never go away. They're always there, and you always have to be persistent.
So the fiscal year 20 NDAA tried to better focus the department's efforts on information operations, and it established a principal information operations advisor and asked the Secretary of Defense to conduct information operations and required a strategy and posture review that was due more than a year ago. It still hasn't been delivered by the department. Can you tell us what the status of that report is, Secretary Maier, and when we could expect delivery?
Senator, yes, we understand both the strategy and the posture review are overdue. They both are now in senior level coordination, so above my level. They pass through my my review, so I would expect in a matter of weeks they would come to you. I would say, and understanding the time's out, that these have helped to animate a lot of the conversations, indeed action within the department to really focus down and in on posture, and then the strategy has prompted a relook at how we go about doing information operations per your opening question, ma'am.
Thank you. So I should assume we would have it by maybe the end of April?
That is our intent, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. Senator Fisher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Fenton, in your nomination hearing last year, you agreed with your predecessor, General Clark, that without sustained CT pressure, we're going to continue to see terrorist groups that are more able to focus on planning and preparing for external attacks. Do you still agree with that statement?
Senator, I absolutely agree with that statement, and there's a direction to the Socom team from the Secretary of Defense to have that as one of our three main priorities: integrated deterrence, counterterrorism, counter-VEO, and crisis response.
I remain highly concerned that we aren't seeing sustained CT pressure that we need in Afghanistan, especially with respect to ISIS-K. And it's my understanding that we have only had one single strike in over a year. I don't believe that that translates into sustained CT pressure against ISIS-K. Can you describe the challenges of conducting the over-the-horizon CT operations without the reliable partners on the ground, without basing in neighboring countries, and without reliable access to airspace?
Senator, thank you for that and the opportunity to comment. On the first portion of that, reference Afghanistan, I would defer certainly to General Corella, his team, that have a more fulsome insight with a series of partners than I would have, and additional challenges. And SOCOM being one part of a whole government team, I'm sure there are many others that would give you a different insights and more, probably some more fulsome data. But what I would tell you,
do your insights, sir, differ with some of theirs that they've made to this committee?
no. But what I would tell you, Senator, is that part of addressing ISIS in Afghanistan is addressing it globally. And when I look at that question, I certainly view it through the SecDef's priority, and for us, defend the nation. And I think counterterrorism and VEO, it's a very high priority for SOCOM. And as we think about it, we certainly, first and foremost, know that your Special Operations Command team, in partnership with COCOMs, because ISIS is a global organization, can sense, see, and strike anywhere in the globe. And in essence, many of our operations are places where we're not proximate to the target. And in fact, last year, an operation that went off in northwest Syria to remove ISIS #1 from the battlefield, we had to fly across Syria to get that. So we were very far from that target. But our ability to see it, sense it, and then strike it, unquestionable. And I think we've been able to do that globally throughout this year in places that Somalia, with sustained pressure on ISIS against an ops and communications node. And I would add also that global pressure for SOCOM in concert with partnerships goes on even in the Indo-Pacific. So my sense to you, Senator, is that we absolutely have to keep the pressure on ISIS, on any of those terrorist networks. And if I think about it, with a number of the operations that have occurred, and I'd be happy to talk more in a closed setting, it's been an extremely challenging year for these extremist operations, with a number of operations we put together to include in Syria.
Well, SOCOM has been primarily focused on counterterrorism mission for the last 20 years. The Special Operation Forces have a lot of capability that they can bring to the Indo-Pacific. You earlier mentioned your experience there, and I value your knowledge and experience. Can you provide an update on how you plan to rebalance your forces that you have to restructure training and exercises or to develop any kind of unique capabilities in order to meet the increased demand signal that we're getting from Indo-PACOM?
Senator, thank you very much for an opportunity to comment on that. I think certainly as we look at our priorities across the WIN category of integrated deterrence, crisis response, and counterterrorism, it's an adjustment. I've heard it referred to in other places as a pivot. I would tell you it's an adjustment for how we're going to address strategic competition, integrated deterrence. It's in our DNA. We've been doing, as your Special Operations Forces, we're really born to do this. And in Indo-PACOM, I think what it means is through the lens of prevention, deterrence, and preparation, beginning with partnerships with nations in that region that want the U.S. there. They want to see a U.S. capability. And frankly, in many ways, when that U.S. capability shows up, through the lens of Special Operations Forces, we're absolutely able to move a partnership toward the U.S. and away from the PRC. I think that same type of partnership helped us in Ukraine with the training that we were doing there as the Ukrainians from 2014 and on saw the special operations way of warfare and the way of doing business. All of that is very applicable to what we're doing in the Indo-Pacific. But I defer certainly to Admiral Aquilino for a more fulsome of how he sees it, because I'm always in line with his requirements. And we do that through our Theater Special Operations Command, our TSOC, Special Operations Command Pacific. We take lead from them at the Socom enterprise. But we are invested there, Senator Fisher, in a way to deter, prepare for, and then if needed, prevail in conflict.
Thank you, and thank all of you gentlemen for your service.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator Gillibrand, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Nakasone, we've been working together on helping to develop a greater cyber capability amongst new personnel, and we created this Cyber Academy for civilian workforce, which should be accepting its first class in 2024, applications in 2024 for a class in 2025. And we're using the universities that NSA has already assessed as having the correct cyber capability and cyber curriculum. But in light of your testimony, I wanted to ask, would it be helpful to you to have a dedicated cyber force training just for permanent cyber command personnel for the military side as well? And if you did want that, what would that look like?
Senator, first of all, thank you for the work that you've done to build a greater population of cyber savvy folks. I'm not sure that we need an academy yet. What I'm very, very focused on is being able to look at the continued success we're going to have with the program that you've worked with in New York. I'm very interested in continuing the successes that we've had across the National Guard with state partnership programs. You're very, very familiar with the New York National Guard's work with Brazil and other National Guard forces here. And I'm also very, very focused on ensuring that the ROTC and Academy programs continue to have strong growth in terms of the numbers of people that can be commissioned into our force.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Senator Cotton, please.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Maier, you acknowledge in your opening statement that the shift away from counterterrorism is the primary role of our nation's special operations forces. But far from decreasing the need for those forces, I'd suggest that the current threat environment calls for even more capability. They need to continue our counterterrorism missions, support foreign internal defense activities to bolster allies, and engage in new types of operations that are going to counter Chinese and Russian aggression. In that operating environment, would a decrease in force size or budget seem like a reasonable step to you?
So, Senator Cotton, thanks for the question. Yeah, this is the crux of the challenge, right? We're being asked to do more, and our force is probably static. So I would not advocate for a reduction in forces, sir.
I regret that you're here today and not 48 hours from now when we're going to get the President's budget, because I am troubled that you may, in fact, get a reduction in budget or forces. Do you have any thoughts on what we're going to see on Thursday?
Senator, as I think you know, I can't talk to what's likely to be in the budget, but I think, as General Fenton and I both said, the priorities that we have identified are represented in that budget. Sir.
Okay. Well, if my fears are proven out, I think you can count on many members of this committee, probably in both parties, to try to make sure that our Special Operations Forces have the resources they need. General Fenton, do you agree that SOCOM's requirements and your relevance are growing in this threat environment, not decreasing?
Senator, I would agree with that. I think the SOCOM requirements to be in campaigning and competition are absolutely important and exceedingly asked for by combatant command teams, where I draw my requirements from, certainly in line with their Theater Special Ops Command, the TSOCs. But we see it because much of this begins with partnerships that we forge through the SOCOM team and enable. And the payoff in many ways can be looked at in the vicinity of Ukraine.
So a decrease in either your budget or your personnel levels would add risk to your mission and therefore to our nation.
Well, Senator, no one wants to see a decrease in personnel or the budget. I would tell you that I think it would not reflect the requirements, number one, a decrease of that. And number two, we would be forced at some point to make hard choices, because each and every time I think you'll see me give you the best Special Operations Command for the budget we get.
Okay. Mr. Maier, when we're talking about your personnel, I want to return to something else you had in your opening statement, because I want to make sure we're using this personnel budget the right way. You talked about the need for more staff. I got to tell you, that gets my hackles up pretty quickly. I think we have plenty of staff in the Pentagon, way too much. Frankly, I think we have too many people dressed like you and me and not enough people dressed like the men to your right and your left performing these jobs. Could you explain a little bit more about what kind of staff you're talking about and why you would need more staff?
So, Senator, I was referring specifically to the Special Operations Low-Intensity Conflict staff that performs the Title 10 responsibility of the organized, train, equip for SOCOM. So frankly, sir, a lot of what these staff do on a daily basis is try to articulate the soft value proposition back into the department with the services. Some of my concern is that as we go from the less intense environment of counterterrorism, or go towards a less intense environment without the intense focus on counterterrorism, that some of what SOF has traditionally been afforded will be lost in that. So, sir, sometimes this is just as simple as making sure that we have the soft value proposition represented in resourcing, training, planning. I've been frankly surprised at times of how that has been forgotten or too narrowly defined as being a counterterrorism problem. So, you know, my 40-some-odd staff are very much in that business, and you know, it's the analytics, it's supporting special programs, other things like that that are very, I think, akin to the soft value proposition, but don't have representation often within the broader department, sir.
Okay. General Fenton, one final question. You, in your opening statement, you talked about the strategic transition for the Special Operation Forces. Could you explain a little more about the role that your forces, Special Operations Forces, are going to be expected to play in the future fight? And if so, if you can, at an unclassified level, maybe help share that story?
Senator, thank you for that. I'll focus on integrated deterrence and where the Secretary and the Department have asked us to be aligned. And when I think about that, I think about it along three lenses: prevent, prepare, and then prevail. I think on the prevention side, it's all about being forward. It's about being deployed. Our skills, cultural understanding, language, and a familiarity with many of these environments that come from organizations in our enterprise that know those places well, such as our 1st Special Forces Group in Indo-Pacific, for instance, have a very deep familiarity with all things that go on in many of the partner nations. I think it's key to keep that certainly thick and strengthened. So part of it is being out, training, advising, assisting, building capabilities, and using many of the tools this committee gives us in the form of security cooperation, 1202, and counterterrorism tools. That's a very key part. I think it also allows us an opportunity to help the joint force and enable them as we're out in those environments and are able to prepare through our understanding of everything from seabed all the way to space domain, and then work in concert with General Nakasone, and Jim Dickinson in a soft space cyber triad. I think those are all very important. There is an acceleration towards that. It began before, certainly under General Rich Clark, and we're accelerating that in the Special Operations Team, while we stay vigilant on the counterterror mission and certainly our crisis response duties as directed by the Secretary.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. Senator Blumenthal, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Let me begin by adding an exclamation point to the point that Senator Cotton just raised about the need for ample resources devoted to our national defense, most especially the kind of work that you are doing. I think your testimony today reinforces my hope that we will have bipartisan support for that kind of sufficient investment in our national defense. I've been to Ukraine 3 times over the roughly last year, once before the invasion, and had an opportunity to talk to some of the Special Forces trainers who were there working with Ukrainian personnel. General Fenton, I am hoping that there has been continued training outside of Ukraine. I realize none of those Special Operation Forces are located physically there now. When I was there last, a number of weeks ago, none were there, at least visibly to us. But I'm hoping that that training mission is continuing outside of Ukraine.
Senator, thank you for that. It absolutely is continuing outside of Ukraine in a number of locations, bringing the capability that continues to assist Ukrainian SOF as part of the entire Ukrainian military. And that training goes along a number of the lines you've seen before. The capability to defend themselves, the capability to mission, plan, and orient, an understanding of the intelligence, and certainly an understanding of creating dilemmas for the Russian formation. And so the Ukrainian SOF is a key part of the Ukrainian military's approach. We do that as your Special Operations Team, certainly under General Cavoli's direction and watch, and in concert with his teammates, in order that that is integrated with the entirety of the approach that SecDef's directed.
What's your assessment as to how well the Ukrainian Special Forces have operated?
Senator, I think they've been superb from the very beginning. And I will start the journey in the mid-90s, when Special Operations, Special Forces in particular, our 10th Special Forces Group, made contact with Ukrainian forces after the fall of the Soviet Union. And that generational relationship, something that's very, very important to your Special Operations community, in my sense, laid the pathway for, in 2014, our ability to really get after it after the first invasion by the Russians.
Thank you.
So they've done superbly well, and they've been extremely willing to prepare and to fight.
And to learn.
And to learn, yes, sir.
General Nakasone, I think a number of experts have been somewhat surprised that the Russians haven't been more aggressive in the cybersphere against Ukraine in this past year. What's your assessment as to why they haven't been more aggressive, why they've been somewhat apparently quiescent, or maybe the Ukrainians have just resisted and fended them off without our knowing it?
Senator, the Russians have been very active in Ukraine in terms of conducting a number of cyber attacks, including destructive and disruptive attacks. I think there's several pieces of the story here that are important, though. First of all, when you begin the plan and you think it's going to be a very easy invasion, perhaps you don't do enough planning with regards to your enabling activities. Secondly, give full credit to the Ukrainians. They did a tremendous job in terms of building their cybersecurity resilience. And the third piece is that this is, again, for persistent engagement, my discussion previously, being able to enable and act with your partners. The Russians have not been as successful, and there's a number of reasons for that, and I would point also to the fact that we've been able to bring a series of partners, including the private sector, that have a tremendous capability and capacity against the Russians.
I've been impressed when I have spoken to President Zelensky with his focus on cyber, Do you think that there is a greatly increased danger or risk of Russian cyber attack if the counteroffensive anticipated this spring by Ukraine is successful?
We're watching this very carefully. This is the matter of vigilance that I spoke to earlier, because by no means is this done in terms of the Russia-Ukraine situation. And so as Russia looks at, armaments coming into the country, as Russia looks at different support, how do they react? One of the things that we are charged with is ensuring the security of the U.S. critical infrastructure and key resources with our partners in DHS and FBI. And so this is something that we're working closely every single day on, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you very much to you all, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Ernst, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, excuse me, for being here today. Secretary Maier and General Fenton, I really do commend your submission of the joint statement to our committee. It reflects both alignments and oversight from civilian policymakers as well as our uniformed leaders. So thank you for submitting that. Secretary Maier and General Fenton, as outlined in your SOF vision and strategy, how does the SOF balance its various missions with great power competition, counterterrorism, and crisis response, your three main missions? Because right now we're seeing great power competition increase, ever increasing with Iran, of course our pacing threat with China, and of course with the Russian incursion and war in Ukraine. So how do you balance those missions, and how should that great power competition affect your mission?
Thank you, Senator Ernst. I'll take it from a more strategic level and then ask General Fenton to speak in more detail. So I would say first and foremost, it's a risk assessment, and it's weighing against the requirements. So there is always more requirements from the combatant commands than we can meet as a force, and those numbers keep going up. But I think at the same time, we're very focused on the idea that while the strategic focus is, of course, on the pacing challenge of the PRC and the acute threat of Russia, we can't be surprised by an attack from another adversary. And I think managing that risk is many cases what the SOF enterprise does very well. We are, in essence, the hedge against that risk. So it's a constant effort to look for areas where we can innovate, to be able to do more, do things on a more sustainable fashion. And in some cases, look for where we're getting what my New England friends would call a twofer, where we're able to do counterterrorism work and have those partnerships and access that then helps us also on the NDS priorities, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, General Fenton.
Senator, thank you for that question. I think to your point on balance and adjustment, I'm constantly focused on that in the command. As you mentioned, the integrated deterrence, crisis response, and counterterrorism operations, all of those extremely high priority for the Socom team. I think on the integrated deterrence side, we take our lead from the combatant commands and their requirements for engagement in their regions, what they need for partnerships, how they need capabilities built, and Senator, in many ways, our counterterrorism tools and the form factors that we have in terms of how we present forces, those are equally applicable in the integrated deterrence, the requirements from the COCOMs for developing a force and competing with adversaries such as the PRC, as they are for actual counterterrorism efforts that you know very well. But I think it's a balance. Some of those tools are interchangeable, or we can bring them across the spectrum. Very often it is about the relationships that then turn into things that we've seen in Ukraine, and we just have mentioned here, soft investment early, and we've seen that in many other places as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I know that my colleague, Senator Cotton, talked about your top line and end strength cuts and how that would impact SOF. I am very, very concerned about that, and it doesn't matter what commander it was, whether it was General Tony Thomas or Rich Clark or now you, General Fenton. I've always brought this up in discussions, and every SOCOM commander I have visited with has said, ma'am, we're going to make do. We will execute the mission regardless of the budget. I get that. But I just need to stress to this committee how important it is that we continue to fund you at the appropriate levels. You give us the greatest bang for the buck with what you do all around the globe. So we won't question that, but I do want to dig in a little more. General Fenton, I've supported Section 1202, regular warfare authorities. That was done in the fiscal year 18 NDAA. And your joint statement describes this as essential for applying soft capabilities against malign actors. So in your personal opinion, would enabling those partner forces that are responding to hostilities enhance SOF's irregular warfare contribution to great power competition?
Senator, thank you for that. And I'll thank this committee for the 1202 authority. That is a very important tool in the arsenal of the special operations tools that we use to either develop partnerships, build capability and capacity of a nation, and certainly then move forward. So thank you very much for that. It is key for us to engage in partnerships at that level that involve irregular warfare. Our ability to operate and build up a capability of a nation, also have it able to look at any malign influences coming its way and identify those and then address them. And those forces that we work with provide options for their national command leadership as well as dilemmas for any adversary. So, Senator, I would say a very small investment in many ways, almost like your special operations team. It's a very small investment, but for a very high return on the dollar. So I thank you very much for that and happy to talk more about it in closed session.
Very good. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. Let me recognize Senator Hirono and ask Senator King to preside while I attend the Banking Committee. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your testimony today. And General Fenton and Secretary Maier, thank you for meeting with me earlier. General Nakasone, I have been deeply concerned by the state of critical infrastructure on and off military installations. Crumbling and out-of-date infrastructure lead to delays in maintenance schedules and put communities at risk for environmental disasters, as we have seen in Hawaii. But it also leaves infrastructure that is critical to our national security, but often as an afterthought, like wastewater treatment plants and pipelines exposed to cyber attacks. That is why I very much appreciated President Biden's national cybersecurity strategies focus on defending critical infrastructure, i.e. things like wastewater treatment plants and pipes. How would the Department of Defense collaborate with other federal agencies to implement the infrastructure goals outlined in the President's national cybersecurity strategy?
Senator, from a cybersecurity perspective, we begin, first of all, with the focus on DoD critical infrastructure. 2 weeks ago, I was in Hawaii to see Admiral Aquilino and to work with him in terms of looking at the DoD critical infrastructure within the islands. We work with a series of partners when requested to provide that assistance. That comes as a request for assistance from other agencies to the department, of which then we would be part of that assistance.
Don't you think that maintaining the physical aspects of our critical infrastructure is a very important part of your ability to do your mission?
Certainly, we need a platform upon which to operate. I agree with you, Senator. And so what we are focused on, though, is obviously the cyber elements of that, and then working again through the department to assist and answer those requests.
So I think it's all, we need to look at these things in a much more total kind of an aspect. That is why it was really important for Admiral Aquilino to ask for an assessment of the infrastructure needs across the services in Hawaii, but I would say across the country. For, again, you, General Nakasone, and General Fenton, the administration's NDS identifies China as the pacing challenge for our military. And to create enduring deterrence, it is critical that we remain the partner of choice in the Indo-Pacific ARR, which is why I have supported additional funding for exercises in the region and building on longstanding relationships, like the Compacts of Free Association, which we are concluding our negotiations on. What opportunities have your respective commands had for multilateral training last year, specifically in the Pacific AOR, and how will you build from those going forward? This is for General Nakasone and Fenton.
Senator, we began with Cyber Flag, which is our annual keystone exercise. We invited a series of partners from the Pacific. That includes Korea, that includes Australia, that includes other nations within the Pacific that decided to come and exercise with us. That's one piece of it. The second piece is what I had spoken to previously, which is a state partnership program, working very, very closely with Hawaii, the Hawaii Army National Guard, Hawaii Air Force Reserve and National Guard, to be able to assist them as they take a look at Indonesia and the Philippines, two countries that are partnered with the state of Hawaii. And so that's an area that I think has got tremendous potential in the coming year.
General Fenton, I am particularly interested in really strengthening, I agree with your area of focus, General Nakasone, but also the Pacific Island nations such as Palau and Marshall Islands and Micronesia. Can you add to the response, please?
Senator, I can. I'll start with your special operations team out there through the Theater Special Operations Element, SOCPAC, Special Ops Command Pacific, is part of all the Indo-PACOM exercise events. It's very key for us because our ability to build partner and allies along with the entire Indo-PACOM team for your special ops it's a pacing item. It's very important and certainly a high priority for this nation and the Secretary of Defense. Below that, we also have our own either bilateral or multinational special operations training events in the region or back in places around bases that we have in CONUS. So our ability to be linked up with the Indo-PACOM, desired end states for partners and allies, and really enable that, plus what we bring, and it's in our nature, it's in our DNA to be a partner force of choice, I think is very, very impactful for Admiral Aquilino and Indo-PACOM. I would say to your partnering anywhere is important to us. So to the island nations, whether it be Oceania, Micronesia, Melanesia, Polynesia, your special ops team has relationships there already. Some of that is not in exercise, but certainly in contact or in deployments we've had throughout the years. And we'll continue to do that and strengthen it as the Indo-PACOM team and commander would want.
Thank you. As my time is up, I just wanted to mention, General Fenton, that I did appreciate that in your prepared remarks, you talk about diversity of thought and background in our people as a critical enabler of the American advantage. Thank you very much. And the focus on maintaining that kind of diversity, I completely agree with you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Senator King. Thank all of you for your service. Thanks for being here today. General Nakasone, I like what you said in your opening. We win with people. I think that's everything that we do, especially our country. You know, in your department, when you're looking to recruit people, obviously cyber is your purview. What other areas do you look for in young people? Information technology, what all areas do you look for in recruiting somebody for cyber?
We look for someone that can do critical thinking, Senator. That begins with it. There are more than just information technology majors out there that are successful in cyber. There are linguists, there are mathematicians, there are liberal arts majors. What we're looking for is someone that has an interest, has a passion to do this type of work, that doesn't want to leave work until they're able to get the access that's necessary for us to have an effect.
Is that growing? Are we losing more to private sector? How's that going?
So first of all, on the recruiting piece, the services have tremendous success in recruiting cyber forces. They're not having a problem filling it. I think the challenge becomes later on is there are a number of choices that young people have. And so I think we have to think a bit differently here. First of all, maybe we need to lengthen the obligation to become trained in cyber because it is so attractive. Secondly, I do believe that when you come to our forces, that's the only thing that you should do for your career. Much in the same way I've watched special operations forces be successful. When you become a special operations force operator, that's what you're doing all the time, and that's what they want to do. Our force is the same way.
Yeah, how's retention in your department of young people once they fill their duty? Do we have pretty good retention to re-up?
So it's a mixed bag by service, Senator. I can certainly come back to it, the numbers, but the challenge, of course, is that there are a lot of choices.
Yeah.
And so that's what we have to make sure that we're on guard for.
How concerned are you about TikTok and the influence that they're having on American kids?
So TikTok concerns me for a number of different reasons. One is the data that they have. Secondly is the algorithm and the control, who has the algorithm. Third is the broad platform. Influence operations, as we talked about previously, it's not only the fact that you can influence something, but you can also, turn off the message as well when you have such a large population of listeners.
Yeah, thank you for that. General, you don't have a recruiting problem, do you?
Senator, I'll start that we are recipient of services, and I would want all to know that we're very integrated with their recruiting efforts, and there are some challenges out there for the services. Right now, your special operations team is not having a recruiting problem. We're at an aggregate at a very high level of recruitment, and the department's got a retention number, I think, that's one of the highest in decades, and we're right there along with them.
Yeah, you require the most rigorous training standards in the military, correct?
Senator, we require very high standards, and folks who want to come and be part of that journey, who have determination, grit, initiative, willingness to see something through, and frankly, what we really look for is somebody, a quiet professional, somebody who will do this mission and succeed, and then get ready to do the next one.
Would you agree that it's also the most riskiest part in our military?
Senator, there's a lot of our teammates out there across the services that do some incredible feats of both their mission and bravery. I'd say we're one part of what our department has as the most incredible military formation in the history of mankind.
That's a pretty diplomatic way to put it, General.
We do some really tough missions.
Yeah, very tough. I think there's a lesson here for the rest of our military, and it's not everybody, but America's youth want to serve an organization with purpose and patriotism. I mean, we all saw that growing up. In light, it seems people rise to standards that you set for them. I mean, I saw that in my former life of coaching. I mean, you set a standard, and most of the time, if you push them hard enough, no matter whether they want to or not, they'll reach that standard. So I want to thank them for what Socom does and everything that y'all stand for, because you're on the front lines every day, and you're usually the first one to get there and the last one to leave. So thanks to your group and the people that stand up for this country and the patriotism that they have for us. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
On behalf of the chairman, Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So one of the primary purposes of this hearing is to evaluate your command's budget requests. Most federal agencies have to balance their must-haves against their nice-to-haves when it comes to requests for money, and they have to account for long-term costs. For example, the maintenance of fleet vehicles that they want to buy, but not the Department of Defense. DoD submits its budget for the things it wants, and then it submits a second list of things that they want funded, and they don't add what the long-term costs will be. DoD calls this second list unfunded priorities. I call it a wish list. Now, last year, some parts of DoD stuck to their budgets and didn't put anything on a wish list, but not Socom. Nope. Socom got $13.2 billion in its regular budget, then turned around and asked for $656 million additionally. Now, one of the items on Socom's wish list last year was $8.7 million to ensure that a Socom armament facility could meet blast exposure standards that protect service members from traumatic brain injury. General Fenton, do you agree that if Socom needs funding for a project that will ensure that it is in compliance with basic safety standards and help protect workers from brain damage, that project should be part of the command's budget?
Senator, I put a high priority on safety.
So should it be part of your budget then?
And any budget I build will reflect my priorities, and priority is safety, and certainly aligned with the NDS.
So that means you think that something like this should be in the base budget?
Senator, I put a high priority on safety, and my budget will
But you're
align.
telling me your budget reflects your priorities, and somehow this didn't even make it in the basic budget. So look, let me ask it this way then. This armament facility improvements weren't funded last year. So are you going to put that in your base budget this year, or are you going to count on Congress to add extra money for it, which it didn't do last year?
Senator, the first thing I'll do is get intimately familiar with the armament facility you're discussing right now. 6 months into the job, I'm still working my way through a number of certainly locations in the special ops community, so I'll take that for the record and get back to you. But my budget will be reflective of my priorities that are aligned with the national defense strategy, and safety of our entire force is certainly a high priority for me.
Well, I appreciate that, but I just want to make another point for the record. I wasn't born yesterday. You know, I get what's happening here. Socom and other commands are gaming the system. They take costs that should be part of a base budget request, essential programs like funding to come into compliance with brain injury prevention standards, and then put them on the wish list, daring Congress not to fund them. And that way, they can boost their overall budget allocation. In January, I sent a letter to Secretary Austin, along with Senators Braun, Lee, and King, telling DOD not to send Congress any wish lists as part of this year's budget. So, General Fenton, this is your first time submitting a budget as the commander of Socom. You'll be sending it over to Congress this week, so you should be right on top of this. Will you pledge not to request any unfunded priority items on top of your annual budget request?
Senator, we'll submit the budget that reflects my priorities aligned against the NDS, and I will submit that, and any UPOL required by law that reflects facts of life changes, accelerated capabilities, and any additional NDS initiatives.
Let me stop you right there. I just want to be required. You need to submit a list. You are right. That is required by law. But you don't need to put anything in it or ask for any funding from it. The lists from European Command and Transportation Command were blank last year. That is, they lived within their budget. They did not come back for an additional bite at the apple. And I'm just asking if you will agree to do the same thing. That's what budgets are about. They're about making your priorities clear, and I want to know if you're willing to live within the budget that you have from the DOD and not come back here for more.
Senator, I'll submit a budget that is aligned with my priorities and aligned with the NDS.
Is that a yes or a no?
Senator, as requested by law, and by law, I will submit a UPOL. I will take into consideration any facts of life changes.
That's frankly, that's not even a very artful dodge. Look, we don't let any other part of the federal government behave this way, and for good reason. The budget process is about making tough choices and setting clear priorities. Anything in the regular budget must include an analysis of the long-term costs, not things that are on the wish list. I have a bipartisan bill to eliminate waste like this, but DOD could shut it down voluntarily right now, and I urge you to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
On behalf of the chairman, Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, first of all, thank you for your service to our country. And I have to admit, I like seeing options in the budget. I like seeing alternatives. It doesn't mean that everything that's on the budget is necessarily going to be funded by or recommended by this committee, but to see the other options out there, from my perspective, I appreciate seeing those others that sometimes may not make it all the way through the budget process. General Fenton, Socom has undoubtedly been reorienting from counterterrorism to preparation for a high-end, near-peer fight. Assume a situation in which we had to respond under Article 5 and support our NATO allies in Europe, and China concurrently took military action to claim Taiwan. What do you assess would be Socom's capability to support a two-theater war concurrently in Europe and the Pacific?
Senator, what I can tell you now is that your special operations team is already globally deployed, 5,000 personnel in 80 different countries at combatant command request and at times at departmental request. Our ability to address the integrated deterrence piece, crisis response and counterterrorism, we are absolutely able to do all that. We're able to do the front end, competition, integrated deterrence with training, building capability, partners and allies. And at the same time, we're also ready to prepare an environment for the joint force and prevail in conflict.
I think what I'm really trying to get at is it seems as though our policy here is not necessarily to win in two theaters, and yet everything that we can do to be in a position to give the young men and women on the front lines every opportunity, we should be talking about now before it ever happens. And I just, with regard to a budget which you will prepare and bring in and lay out, would it be fair to say that there are other items that could be done in the very near future that could help us do a better job of preparing for a two-front defensive capacity?
Senator, I stayed focused daily on readiness and training and providing the President and the Secretary a range of options for whatever conditions they may put in front of us. As you described, in some level of potential two-front, or we stay trained and ready to provide options across a number of contingencies that the Department has asked us to plan for, along with the combatant commands. At the same time, also providing dilemmas for the adversaries, both either in integrated deterrence or in high-end conflict.
Thank you. General Nakasone, as we all know, the Cyber Mission Force comprises elements provided by all of the services. Is there anything we should do to better execute this construct?
Senator, I'll be coming back to the committee under 1502, the NDA section that came out in the recent NDA to talk about the shortfall. So that comes at the end of March. That'll be the first indicator that I'll have to be able to communicate with the committee. I suspect between that and section 1534, which requires me to come back at the end of June with the Secretary and the Chairman to talk about shortfalls and readiness, we'll be able to outline exactly what we think are the areas. There are some, and there are areas that we can work with the services to improve.
Thank you. Also, General, last year we discussed the benefit of NSPM 13 and NSPM 21 and what they provided the command to effectively conduct cyber operations, recognizing that they're both classified in nature, but basically they have streamlined and lay out a collaborative effort in which to provide accelerated timeframes for cyber operations. As you look over the years since, what, if anything, has changed in your assessment on the impact they have had on cyber operations?
Senator, really very little impact. If I can rewind the clock just a bit, 2018, as you recall, is you assisted with us to make sure that within the NDAA that we saw cyber as a traditional military activity. That was a huge step forward for us. I would also say that the policy memorandums that you talked about there, they're foundational for what we do in a manner that is much more predictable, both for ourselves and for policymakers. So we continue to work with it. We are continuing to move forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.